Hey guys, welcome to Praxis Elementary Education Level 1 Practice Test. So in all we have 4 practice tests on YouTube and this is the first one. So the levels basically mean like level 1 most people think is the easiest of the 4, level 4 most people think is the hardest, but there can be variation just depending on the person. We have 20 questions here. In the description, all the 20 questions with the answer choices are in the description. So what I would do is answer those first, then come back, watch the video so you can get more information on the concepts that you need to know and what all the correct answers are. Besides that, what I would say is we do have a mobile app coming. So right now as I make this, we're in the middle of January 2021. The mobile app for Praxis Elementary Ed for both Android and iOS will be out in early February, so just in a couple weeks from now, and that will be a great way to study as well. It'll be free to install, and I think very useful. Over 1,000 questions, really good practice, detailed feedback for each question, and the app customizes to you and has some fun little gamification features, and I think you'll like it. So anyway, check that out. Best way to know when it's out, just subscribe to the channel, and we'll be sending updates as the app is available. Okay, so go ahead and jump in here. Question number 1 goes over additive inverse, and I need my pen. Okay, additive inverse, right? So really, it's just a question of do we know what that means, right? So when you're looking at additive inverse, right, is all you're really doing is just flipping the number, right? So if it's here in this case, it's negative 12, we flip it to 12, right? Pretty simple concept, right? If you said what is the additive inverse of 7, negative 7, right? So all you're doing is just if it's positive, make it negative. If it's negative, make it positive. Keep the number the same. That's all you got to do. And then we get into multiplicative inverse right there. And we just want to make sure we don't confuse this with additive inverse. Okay, so multiplicative inverse just means that A over B equals B over A. All right, and you say, well, Brad, that's my name. You just, all I see here is a 5, right? But 5 is the same as 5 over 1, right? So 5 over 1 is the number we're looking at, and 5 over 1 equals 1 over 5. Okay, so there we go. Right there. The multiplicative inverse of 5 is 1/5. A pretty simple concept. You're just, doing the inverse. Okay, and so that gets us through additive and multiplicative inverse, and then we jump into properties. So we do need to be familiar with associative, commutative, and distributive property. So this one is associative, right? And really, associative property is just saying you can add or multiply regardless of how the numbers are grouped, right? So in this one, we have 3 plus 4 plus 5 equals 3 plus 4 plus 5. And so all we're really saying here is where those parentheses are doesn't matter. And if we reversed the order here, it wouldn't matter either for addition or for multiplication, right? Different for the others, right? So for associative, for addition or for multiplication, how we group the numbers, where we put the parentheses, things like that, that will not affect the final answer. Okay, and then we have a distributive one. So this one a little bit harder, right? So as we do this, right, so we start off with 15 times 9. So 15 times 9 is 135 plus, right, really we have, right here we have 24x minus 4. It's a little harder to read in the form that I wrote it there, divided by 2. But that's mostly because YouTube won't let me write it like this. But like in our app, it'll be written, they're all written like that. So regardless, so all it really means here with distributive is that we're going to divide 24x by 2, and we're going to divide negative 4 by 2, so that you do it for both, right? So when you carry that down, we have 135 plus, so 24x divided by 2. So 24 divided by 2 is 12. We just have an x on it. Okay. And -4 divided by 2 is just -2. Okay. And then we're left with, so 135 minus 2 is 133. 12x stays the same. So we have 12x plus 133. Answer choice B, right? And so this is a form of distributive property, right? That we're just, what we did right here was distributive. Okay, and then we jump into, we got 2 questions coming up here about properties of 1 and 0. So this is a property of 1. So that is a section, right? So they're just saying 1 to the n always equals some number. Okay, so let's do a couple practice ones, right? Just plug in a couple numbers for n. Whoops, 1 to the, that's a 3. 1 to the third. So 1 times 1 times 1 equals 1, right? What about 1 to the 7th? Right, so we just multiply 1 by itself 7 times rather than 3. And it doesn't matter if this was a 7 or if it was 70 or if it was 700, is that answer is always going to be 1. And so we can choose that guy right there. And then we also have to the 0 power. Okay, so this one is 340 to the 0. And again, same kind of thing, right? It really doesn't matter if it's 5 to the 0, 10 to the 0, 340 to the 0. Anything to the 0 power is 1. Okay. And so that's just a little rule to have memorized. So really, both of these are pretty like low-hanging fruit questions, which is why we see them in level 1. But if you don't know the rule, then you might get it wrong, right? So just making sure that we know anything to the first power. So we go back here. Right? Anything where the base is 1, sorry I said that wrong, right? Anything where the base is 1, this is the base right here. This is the base right here, right? Base is 1, whatever power it goes to, it's just going to be 1. Anything here, anything to the 0 power, answer is 1. Okay, and then we get into some questions about charts and graphs. Okay, and so you are responsible for knowing just the basic difference between when do you use a bar graph, when do you use a line graph, when do you use a pie chart. That table answer is basically never the answer if you see these 4 options here. So as we are looking at this, what we want to know is that a bar graph is best when comparing revenue or profit for different time periods, right? And so what that looks like usually is, right, so we have like, you know, something like this, right? And then over here you have like the, like, you know, businesses report revenue different quarters, right? Every public company does this, right? So Q1, Q2, Q3, etc., right? And so here, those quarters are different time periods, right? And then you'll see, you know, like that. Okay, and so over different time periods, that's what we want to see is a bar graph. So a line graph is better if we're comparing results for the same time period and more than one group. And then finally, a pie chart is used to compare parts to whole, such as percentages of age groups within a corporation or team. That could be an example for a pie chart. So I think most people know what a pie chart looks like. Okay, question 8. Okay, so that's the end of the math for level 1. And we jump into, here they ask us about Bloom's taxonomy. So perhaps you've heard of Bloom's taxonomy, and perhaps you have not. Or perhaps you forgot what it was all about. But with Bloom's taxonomy, we start with understanding, right? That's sort of like the lowest level. Then we jump up to applying, and then eventually analyzing and evaluating. So that's answer choice A, right? So really with Bloom's taxonomy, it's just important to know that it relates to essential questions for learning. Understanding the facts is a simple form of learning, right? And that would be much more just understanding, while being able to apply those facts is more advanced. analyzing, and evaluating. Those are the highest forms of Bloom's taxonomy. In the personal health portion of science class, we should be learning about all the following, except for which of these? And so that would be the climate change question. Right there, right? So students should be learning about the importance of nutrition, types of food to eat, as well as the hazards of substance abuse. Diseases should also be briefly studied. The importance of regular exercise also might be fit into here as a possible answer choice, and that would also be correct. But the health impacts of climate change would be beyond the personal health portion of science class. Okay, an example of ineffective communication. So we're jumping into communication for the next couple questions. Let's see, preparing a response while listening, clarifying question, paraphrasing, or summarizing. Okay, so if we're preparing a response while listening, we're not really listening that well, right? Okay, so preparing a response while listening, that's referred to as rehearsing, and it is a form of ineffective communication. However, clarifying questions, paraphrasing, and summarizing are all forms of active listening. Question 11, which of the following is not a special teaching strategy to promote listening skills of ESL students? And what we want to know here is, for ESL students, making the material relative to the culture of the United States is not nearly as good as making the material relevant to the cultural background of the actual students. Teachers can promote the listening skills of ESL students by choosing topics that are of interest to the students, giving examples that are easy to understand, and making material relevant to their cultures. All of those are correct. 12. Which of the following is the least important aspect of communication during an oral presentation? This may be surprising to you, but the answer that we actually want is content. Eye contact and gestures make up most of body language, which accounts for 55% of communication. Tone of voice makes up 38% of communication. Actual content only accounts for 7% of communication. Right? And so within that, we would like to know that over 90% of communication is nonverbal, right? That's could easily be the question instead of this, is kind of, and you don't need to know the exact percent, but you want to know that it's over 90. A short tale in which a moral lesson is taught, often with animals or inanimate objects or as characters, is called a fable. Answer choice B. So a short tale in which a moral lesson is taught, animals or inanimate objects, is a fable. Comparing some of the other answer choices, fairy tale is just a fictional story involving humans, magical events, or animals, usually. A tall tale, which should describe unbelievable events. An example of a tall tale could be the story of Paul Bunyan. That would be a common one. Okay, Walden by Henry David Thoreau, which was written in 1854. The book is an account of 2 years spent living in a log cabin and examines ideas of independence and society. What type of book is this? And we would like to know that it's nonfiction. Right? And so it says right in it that it's an account of 2 years spent living in a log cabin, so that it actually happened. It's not some made up story. Nonfiction is the branch of literature dealing with or offering opinions or conjectures based upon facts and reality, and these should include biography, history, or essays. Question 15. Okay, and so they're going to be asking us here about, right, is it rising action, falling action, theme, or plot? So go ahead and read this first. So the following description of the C.S. Lewis book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe says, 4 siblings are sent to a country house where they will be safe. One day Lucy finds a wardrobe that jettisons her to a magical world called Narnia. After coming back, she soon returns to Narnia with her brothers Peter and Edmund and her sister Susan. There they join the magical lion Aslan in the fight against the evil white witch Jadis. Okay, and so which of these is it? Okay, and so we go over these. So plot refers to a sequence of events inside a story which affect other events through the principle of cause and effect. The description we are given does refer to this type of sequence of events and therefore would be considered the plot. So the answer we want is answer choice D, plot. The theme in a piece of fiction is its controlling idea or its central insight. It is the author's underlining meaning or main idea that he or she is trying to convey. Rising action is where the events in the story become complicated and the conflict in the story is revealed. These should be events between the introduction and the climax. Falling action is when the events and complications begin to resolve themselves. So being familiar with these 4 is important. It shows up in more than one question. So if you have any doubt about what any of these mean, you need to dedicate your memory to really focusing in on those. In the description down below all of the questions is we do have links to some of our other videos which go over some of these concepts in detail and specifically link questions that are in this practice test to those videos. So if this is something you feel like you need a little brushing up on, check out that video. The insertion of important background information within a story, such as characters' backstories, is called an exposition. Okay, and so again, you can see, right, theme, plot, rising action. So even though they weren't the answers, if you didn't know what one of those meant, or you were a little uncertain what one of them meant, you might easily guess at them. Okay, so it's important to know theme, plot, rising action, falling action, and then we're adding exposition to the list as well, right? So a narrative exposition is the insertion of important background information within a story. So some examples could be information about the setting, characters' backstories, prior plot events, historical context, things like that. All right. Question 17. Okay, so we say if A equals B, B equals C, then A equals C. What type of reasoning is this? And we here really want to know the difference between inductive and deductive reasoning. The answer is that this is deductive. I generally speaking don't recommend just memorizing questions, but if you were going to, this might be one of them, right? It does show up a lot, just this specific question. This is really a classic form of deductive reasoning. What this means is that deductive reasoning is a type of logic where general statements or premises are used to form a specific conclusion. Question 18. A lawyer trying to point out a character flaw due to the defendant's lack of education would be which type of argument? Okay, and so you'd like to know these arguments too, right? Another common one. So we need to be familiar with the differences between hasty generalization, faulty causation, ad hominem, and bandwagon effect. So this one is ad hominem, which is based on feelings or prejudice rather than facts, reason, or logic. Okay, that's what ad hominem is. Okay, right? And so again, we're saying character flaw due to lack of education, right? So that's really an unfair generalization, and that's ad hominem. Hasty generalization are categorizing a group of people or things based on one person or thing. All Asians are smart because I know one smart Chinese person. This would be a hasty generalization. Faulty causation is incorrectly assigning a cause to an effect. I lost because he's a cheater, as opposed to the fact that you got outplayed, is an example of a faulty causation. And then bandwagon effect is the reasoning that everybody else is doing something, so it must be okay. So getting familiar with those four and making sure you know the differences, pretty likely that you'll see a question of some kind asking you to know the difference between these. Okay. Decoding enables a student to correctly pronounce words. All right, that's an important concept for us to know. So successful decoding occurs when a student uses his or her knowledge of letter-sound relationships to accurately read and pronounce a word. And then finally, the last one, question 20. The words through, thought, sought, dough, enough, and cough, they all have O-U-G-H in them, right? How would we classify these words? These words all would fit into the irregular vowel family. Okay, so the irregular vowel family has special words that phonics just doesn't cover, right? And so these words are all, they take much longer to learn how to spell words like this. So other examples could be the IGH words. You could probably think of examples yourself before I even say them, right? But something like sight or light, right? S-I-G-H-T. The OST words, like cost or most. Just your ED words, like played or watched. And finally, very similar to the question, the AU-GH words, such as laugh or daughter. Okay, so that gets us to the end of practice test number 1. So I hope you did well, and I hope the video helped with perhaps some of the ones that you got wrong, or making sure that all the concepts are clear in your mind, as well as some things that you need to study. So besides that, again, look for the app. It's coming soon, and I think it's going to be very popular, and that it's going to be very useful in studying for this exam. And I will see you on the next video.